Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for standing by and welcome to today's webinar in which we will be talking about contractual stability during coronavirus, what is obligation and what is not. This is Gemma from the Johan Cruyff Institute, your host for today's session. Just a few items before we get started. If you have any technical issues, we will be happy to assist you through the chat tab located on the right side of the screen. You can type your questions in the Questions tab, also located on the right of your screen. I will address them to our speaker after the presentation. Our guest for this session is Enric Ripoll, senior lawyer and specialist in sport law at Ruiz-Huerta and Crespo. We all have been reading news on players reducing their salaries, clubs trying to reduce expenses, or organizations like UEFA or FIFA asking for changing competitions calendars. But what is obligation or just a matter of goodwill? It's something that only a lawyer can tell with the law in hand. Enric is legal advisor to athletes, intermediaries, clubs, and associations, and will help us to put some light to all these questions. Hopefully, after the presentation, we will be able to understand a little bit better what's going on backstage at the offices of all stakeholders involved. Hi, Enric. Good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon, Gemma. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me today.
I can imagine that the lawyers are very busy in these critical times for the sport, so thank you very much for your time. Whenever you want, we are ready for your presentation.
Well, as you said, we are busy, but not as busy as we will be once everything clears up, because as you know, the situation and the scenario changes every day, changes every hour, every minute. So until we do not know exactly what's going to happen, it's going to be difficult to exactly tell everyone or to exactly establish the consequences that this situation will have. Because as you all know, the competitions have been stopped in almost every single country. There are some like Belarus where football is still ongoing, but eventually we will have to face some consequences about income, about how do we finish the competitions, when do we finish competitions, if we can finish the competitions. So just for establishing the situation that we have here, I'm gonna make a quick introduction because not everyone knows the football law, the football regulations established by FIFA. And I need to explain what the situation was until March 2020 and what are the amendments, the guidelines that FIFA issued yesterday in order to help clarify the football and the framework in all the countries around the world. So as I said, I'm going to talk about what we had until March 2020. As you all know, FIFA is the world governing body of football. So it establishes in the RSTP, the regulations on the statutes and transfer of players, a framework that all members association shall respect. These articles regulate and establish the rules, the basic rules for registration periods, transfer, when a player can be registered, when not, how to encourage contractual stability, minors protection, payments of salaries, etc., etc., etc. These guidelines, these basic rules that FIFA establishes in this RSTP have to be mandatorily followed and implemented by the member association. It means every single national association member of FIFA, which are 211 right now. And here is where we find the first definition that has to clarify a little bit what do we have to, or how will the football will react. And the definition sections of the regulations of statute and transfer of players, commonly known as RSTP, we have the definition of season. And FIFA yesterday in the guidelines issued to help understand or help clarify the situation with the coronavirus, makes a point of this definition and actually highlights it very strongly. So as you see in the slide that I'm presenting, the season is defined as the period starting with the first official match of the relevant National League Championship and ending with the last official match of the relevant National League Championship. It means that the season does not finish until the last match is played. Here, as you will see, we will have some issues referring to or regarding this point, because we will see, or I will explain how contracts are usually drafted, not with this definition of season, but to the definition, like to commonly known end of the season with the date. It means the 30th of June or 31st of December of every year. This transfer and registration system established by the FIFA RSTP is quite clear in broad terms. It means like it establishes that like the registration of a period has to be, or of a player, sorry, has to be done during 2 transfer periods known as the winter transfer window and the summer transfer window, that every single association has to establish with a year in advance. It means that both in the winter and summer transfer windows have to be communicated to FIFA and registered before FIFA with 1 year in advance. We will see that FIFA has opened their hand in order to facilitate the change of dates for this next summer transfer window upcoming. And these 2 transfer windows can have a maximum of 16 weeks. 12 in the longer one and 4 in the shorter one. Usually the summer transfer windows in Europe goes from the 1st of July to the 31st of August, means like 8 weeks. And the winter transfer window goes from the 1st of January to the 31st of January. This is more or less the more common extension of the registration periods. Every single transfer has to be done using the TMS, a transfer match system, which is a software that like this one, Livestream, that we're using that now for this webinar, where clubs upload the details of the transfer agreements, loan agreements, employment contracts, termination agreements, etc., etc. And only once everything is done, it's issued the ITC upon request of the club that pretends or tries to register a player. And once everything is completed and checked out by FIFA, the ITC is released and granted the possibility of registering the player. There are some rules on like how do we have to manage the contracts. For example, FIFA establishes that always provided that national law in every national association does not provide otherwise, the minimum length of the contract must be from the effective date of the contract. So if we sign someone on the 1st of July, it has to be as a minimum until the end of the season. Here we go with, again, the definition of season. So it means that as a minimum, we cannot sign a contract, for example, in Spain from the 1st of July to the 31st of January. It should be, in accordance to FIFA regulations, until the 30th of June or until the end of the season, meaning the last match of official match of the season. The maximum shall be 5 years, unless national law provides a longer period, allows a longer period. And in minors, the maximum is 3 years in any case. And it establishes 3 years and not 3 seasons, which is also a problem that we will have to face within these coronavirus situations because of the extension of the employment contracts. As you have already read in the media, that I'm sure you read it. Every year you read something about that. The last case we had was the case of Griezmann and Barcelona and Atletico de Madrid, where Atletico de Madrid was complaining, or allegedly filed a complaint against Griezmann and Barcelona for entering into contract to hire the player more than 6 months prior the ending of his employment contract with Atletico de Madrid. These 6 months obviously will have also a role in the situation, because if contracts were meant to finish on the 30th of June, now are extended, any contact made after the 1st of January or before the 1st of February might be in contradiction with this article. We have that regulations, for example, that establish that the validity of the contract may not be subject to medical test or working permit. That also will have an impact regarding or due to this situation of the coronavirus. If professionals enter into more than one contract covering the same period, the provisions of contractual stability shall apply, meaning disciplinary sanctions against a player for duplicity of contracts. So these are some of the examples that FIFA established as regulations. Now we all know that, and but the main core of the RSTP, the regulations on the status and transfers of players, is the contractual stability. So to FIFA and to all agents in the world of football, meaning players, clubs, associations, agents, intermediaries, etc., the main core of the RSTP is the contractual stability, meaning the fact that the contracts must be preserved. Pacta sunt servanda, as however you want to call it. Now, taking this into consideration, we have to deal with this principle of contractual stability and apply it to today's crisis. Today's crisis will have, as we will see a little bit later on, will extend the dates of those contracts, or are FIFA is suggesting to extend the dates of the contracts and maintain the contracts as existing right now, with a preference over the contract that will be signed. This has some consequences and might have some consequences depending on the situation we face in a case-to-case basis. So Articles 13 to 17 of the RSTP establish the principles of contractual stability in accordance with FIFA. The first of them is that the contract between a professional and a club may only be terminated upon the expiry of the term. If it's 3 years, 3 years. If it's 5-5, it's 1-1, or by mutual agreement. So the unilateral termination of a contract, it's in principle forbidden, not allowed. It means it will have disciplinary consequences imposed by FIFA or the National Association governing and jurisdictional bodies. Establish that principle, we know that FIFA in Articles 14 to 17 establishes the consequences of those terminations that happen not at the expiry of the term agreed or the agreed term, or by mutual consent. So we have to define when can we terminate a contract if it's not by the expiry of the agreed term or by mutual consent. Here we have some circumstances. Article 14 defines pretty well what can be, pretty broad, what can be a just cause to terminate a contract. It means that, for example, an abusive conduct from one of the parties, like, for example, as the jurisprudence of FIFA and CAS says, the termination of a contract may be enforced if, for example, a team deregisters a player or does not pay salaries, is contained in Article 14b, but the deregistration of a player from the team, not allowing him to play or to train with the rest of the teammates, or not be able to even be fielded because he doesn't have any more registration before the league, that would be an abusive conduct from the club. So the player will have a just cause to terminate his contract. Also, recently amended and included in the RSTP, Article 14b, the non-payment of a salary, it's per se defined as a just cause to terminate a contract. These termination will have specific consequences regarding the sanctions and the disciplinary decision, or the decision of the dispute resolution chamber of FIFA, because it's defined exactly as one of the main causes to terminate a contract. So if a player does not receive his salary for a period of 2 months, or proportionally an amount equivalent to 2 months of his salary, he will be allowed to terminate the contract with just cause, and the club will have to pay a compensation for that breach. We also have the termination with sporting just cause that can only be used by the player. Therefore, it means that a club cannot fire a player for poor performance on the field. In order to protect contractual stability, FIFA determined that the sporting just cause is defined as the player that does not play more than the 10% of the minutes where he is available to play during the season. So he will have a just cause to terminate his contract, because, well, it's an open door to avoid like putting in jeopardy someone's career just because someone doesn't want to field the player. These sporting just cause, in any case, is not free of consequences. If a player using this sporting just cause decides to terminate his employment contract with the club, which has to be done in a period of 15 days after the last official match of the season, the player will have to pay a compensation. This compensation, logically, will have it will be a lesser amount than a termination without just cause done by the player. This Article 16 comes to a very important application nowadays. Article 16 establishes that contracts cannot be unilaterally terminated during the course of a season. It means that a player right now applying this coordination with the definition of season that the FIFA ISDE establishes, that it is the period from the first official match till the last official match. We have that players do not have, in principle, just cause to terminate their contracts during the season. So now we are in the middle of the season. Even though we are now with the competition suspended, we are now in the middle of the season. So not the 30th of June, or the arrival of the 30th of June will mean that the season will be over. The season will be over as the ISDE defines, and I said before, like I said many times during this already 20 minutes, that season finishes after the last official match of the year. So not on the 30th of June mandatorily. And then Article 17, probably the most renowned article of the ISDE, that establishes the consequences of terminated contract without just cause. This is a very long article. It has like 4 long paragraphs, but it's a very simple, let's say, a very straightforward article. The party in breach will always be forced, or will always have to pay. It means that if the player terminates the contract without just cause, the club terminates the contract without just cause, they will be condemned to pay a compensation to the party not in breach. Meaning, and there is where we have the problem. How do we calculate the adequate compensation? So Article 17 establishes some of the criteria, establishes that in case of non-payment of salaries, it will be a certain specific consequences. But what it does is in paragraph 2 establish the consequences of terminating contract without just cause if the party in breach is the club. So when the player is the one that gets to get paid, so it's the one who has to receive the compensation, the compensation to be paid will be calculated on the basis of the remaining salary under his employment contract, the employment contract that the club decided to terminate without just cause, or when the player terminates it with just cause, for example, non-payment of salaries. And these remaining salaries will be mitigated with the amount that the player will receive in his new employment contract. So imagine, for example, that the player decides to terminate his contract with just cause because he was not getting his salaries in April. And in July, he signs a new employment contract with a new team. So if his employment contract up to April was 1,000 a month, and the new one is 1,000 a month, and the remaining salary was, 25,000, and during that period, the player will get 13,000. So those 13,000 will be deducted from the compensation of the remaining salary, and the player will get the difference, meaning 12,000 euros. These, in cases of non-payment of salaries, can be increased up to 6 months, depending on the severity of the case and the abuse of the club. In cases of termination with just cause or termination without just cause, we will have to calculate or take into account also the sporting sanctions that might be imposed on one of the parties, on the party in breach, basically. These sporting sanctions will be imposed when the contract is within his protected period. What's the protected period? Is 3 years or 3 complete seasons, whatever comes first, if the player has not reached the age of 28, or 2 years or 2 complete seasons, whatever happens first, if the player has reached the age of 28. So after 28 will be 2, before 28 will be 3. If there's a renewal, the protected period starts over again. This is important because if we have a player that signed a contract on the 1st of July 2017, and we get to 1st July 2018, and the season is not over, since 3 years happened first, he will be already outside the protected period, and he will be able, or the club will be able to sack him without facing sporting sanctions, which might obviously have a consequence on the compensation they will have to pay, but they will not face sporting sanctions. Also, an important establish the basic rules about the contractual stability. Later on, we will talk about specific examples or situations that we will face due to this coronavirus scenario, and I will answer as many questions as I can. But like moving forward on another topic that will be for sure suffer an impact because of this coronavirus is the training compensation and the solidarity mechanism. These two mechanisms, the training compensation and the solidarity mechanism, are meant to take money to the training clubs, those training clubs that grow players from the very young ages to the age of 16, 17, 18, that usually also is the most common clubs in the less developed countries, because they do not have a league that is actually attractive for the players. So once they get to a certain age, they just leave. So FIFA wants to move some of the money to those training clubs using these two mechanisms. Both are calculated on the basis of the age of the player. Training compensation, it's paid from the age of 12 to the age of 21. For the training received by the player from the age of 12 to the age of 21, and it's paid to the age of 23. The solidarity mechanism is from the age of 12 to the age of 23, and it's during the whole career of the player. The training compensation is calculated on a fixed basis of certain amounts established by FIFA in his circular that establishes that what it should be known or considered as the amount that a club from, for example, Spain, will have to invest in a player to get to first division, meaning that if, for example, Barcelona has that player, instead of hiring him, how much it would cost him to bring him from the youth categories to the first team. That's more or less what FIFA calculates it's taking per year for those clubs of category 1. And this is the amount that they have to pay to the training clubs. When this training compensation is due? Well, it's due after the first registration of the player as a professional. Until 1st of March 2020, it was not exactly like that. It was up to the, it was paid in the moment the player signed his first professional contract, not registered as a professional, which is a huge change if you think about it, because now we will not just have to prove that the player has a professional contract, but he is registered as a professional player, which is completely different. It does not have to be the same. And then it will be also due when the player is transferred internationally. But then we have two different consequences. When the player is registered as a professional for the first time, all training clubs will receive the corresponding training compensation. When the international transfer happens, just the last club where the player has been effectively trained will receive the training compensation. So, for example, if a player signs his first professional contract in Spain and was trained in Argentina, all the Argentinian clubs will receive training compensation. And then if the player goes from the Spanish club to a French club, then only the Spanish club will receive training compensation, but only for the time the player was trained in that Spanish club, not for the whole training period. It can be reduced because it's not payable after the age of 23, and it's considered for the training received until the age of 21. That means that if we can prove that the player was trained before the age of 21, for example, he was the captain of the team at the age of 19, we can prove that he was not in formation anymore, he was not in training anymore. So the training compensation will not be accrued after that point where the player is not being trained anymore. The solidarity mechanism, on the contrary, is established in a, let's say, easier method of calculation. Is the 5% of his of the transfer fee paid for, or any compensation paid for the transfer of the player from the age of 12 to the age of 23, which is an important difference, because first is up to the age of 23, not up to the age of 21. First of all, so the clubs training the player with the player registered with them until the age of 23 will receive a part of that solidarity mechanism. And also because we're talking about the season of the 23rd birthday. This will also have an impact due to the extension of the current season, 2019-2020. Once explained this, and sorry if I went too fast, but this is the point where we want to get, or we wanted to get. How did it change, and what does it mean now that we have this crisis of COVID-19? Well, as you understand, if the definition of the season is that the period is starting with the first official match until the day after the last official match of the relevant National League Championship, we have that the definition of FIFA of a season, it does not end on the 30th of June or the 31st of December. 31st of December doesn't matter because, or it's not that it doesn't matter, but it does not have an application right now because no season will be extended after the 31st of December, at least for the moment. But all of those leagues which season begins on the 1st of July up to the 30th of June will suffer an impact of this coronavirus crisis. There are contracts that establish that is for 3 seasons, meaning season 18-19, 19-20, 20-21, and there are contracts drafted in the way that they establish that the contract starts on the 1st of July 2017 and ends on the 30th of June 2020. This FIFA has determined that their recommendation, their guidelines, is to extend the contracts up to the end of the season, no matter what. No matter what I mean is no matter when it ends. Can FIFA do that? Well, there we have a problem. There we have the first conflict, a legal conflict that we will face in the upcoming weeks. FIFA, as a private corporation based on Swiss private law, cannot force the clubs in 211 countries to extend their contracts after the 30th of June. Why they cannot do that? Because private law, as you all know, it's not over public interest. So the public national law of every country will have a prevalence over any rule established by FIFA. In Spain, labor law, it's subjected directly to labor courts, and our legal system does not allow a foreign private corporation to determine something that is agreed between 2 parties and where that private corporation is not a part of. So a contract in Spain, contract in France, or a contract in England agreed between a player and a club cannot be extended by the order of FIFA. That's why FIFA, in its guidelines, encourages the parties to reach an agreement in order to solve this unprecedented situation. What's the impact that this definition of season will have? Well, those contracts that establish the season will be extended. Those contracts that establish a date do not have to be extended per se. It means that they will not have to be directly extended. So there we have, or there we face complicated situation depending on the clubs, the country, the legal framework, and the will of the parties to reach an agreement. What happens if a player that now is being paid, that his contract enters into suspension and he does not agree to follow or to continue playing after the 30th of June because he has a new contract? What happens if the player or when this crisis ends and they are called to play again, does not want to continue playing because he's scared of getting infected by the coronavirus? There's a lot of details, a lot of consequences, a lot of different scenarios that we will have to face. Obviously, in order to fulfill those obligations in any case, FIFA had to open their hands and to reduce the control of their regulations regarding the transfer and registration system. So the first step that FIFA has taken, apart from suggesting the extension of the contracts and the postponement of all those contracts that entered or were expected to enter into force from the 1st of July, is to accept the modification of the registration periods. So as I said before, the registration periods in FIFA have to be communicated and registered before FIFA with a year in advance. Obviously, nobody knew with a year in advance that we will be facing the situation we're facing right now. So FIFA has decided to accept every modification of the registration periods, with the only limitation that the total amount of weeks, the total number of weeks that amongst both or between both registration periods of every country will be 16 weeks. So here, and as I've been discussing with other colleagues, we might face a different situation, because one of the reasons, or one of the main principles that FIFA established in its guidelines, is that there's a prevalence of the contracts that are currently in force, currently ongoing. So those contracts for season 19-20, there's a prevalence over contracts set to start in the season 2021, and that has the objective of maintaining the integrity of competitions. But what happens if the registration period, which has to be a maximum of 16 weeks, it's postponed? For example, let's put in a scenario that the competition finishes on the 31st of July, all the competitions. So we have a month of rest for players and next season training, etc. And the next season starts, let's say, 15th of September. What happens if a club or if a national association establishes that the registration period of summer will last for 12 weeks, as it does now, or 8 weeks as it does now, July and August, and it will start on the 1st of August and will end on the 31st of October, which will be 12 weeks. How do we justify that beginning the competition on the 15th of September, we will have a month and a half more of registration period? Will absolutely, and without any shadow doubt, will have an impact on the integrity of the competition, as we saw last year with the Premier League transfer window. Premier League transfer window, or the Premier League decided to reduce transfer window by to make it end before the beginning of the season, to avoid movement of players once the season has started. But they were the only ones doing it. So what happened is that they closed the registration period on the 8th of August, and then a lot of players left the Premier League after that date without a possibility of being replaced, which had an impact, put in serious jeopardy the integrity of the Premier League competition, in the benefit of other competitions that saw how the registration period of the Premier League ended sooner, so they do not have to worry about losing players in benefit of Premier League teams. So maintaining this registration period in this open, of the possibility of having them this open, for me might be dangerous. But as the document released yesterday by FIFA is a 1.0 draft, so this is the first document that will be amended for sure as the evolution of the crisis goes on and on. So now we have to face the consequences on the contracts. So as I said before, Article 16 establishes that the contract cannot be unilaterally terminated during the course of a season. So what happens if a player has a contract signed on the 1st of July 2020, and the 2019-20 season, instead of finishing on the 30th of June, it continues after that date? Well, applying Article 16, the player cannot terminate his contract, and if his contract says that he is hired for season 19-20 with a specific deadline, I mean without a specific deadline of the 30th of June, he will have to continue playing, and he will not have just cause to terminate his contract just because he has a new contract signed, because this situation has not been caused by the club. So, like I'm sure you've been hearing about the force majeure. Force majeure is defined by law or in law as something not caused by any of the party, or at least not by the one that alleged it, and that is unpredictable, inevitable, or irresistible. So even if we knew at some point in January that there was a virus spreading in China, and nobody could have predicted the extent of the crisis we are right now. So in my opinion, there's other colleagues that might not have the same opinion, but it's best part of law that we all can have an opinion, and we all might be right. In my opinion, this is a clear case of force majeure. It means that we couldn't predict and we couldn't avoid the situation we are right now, which opens a whole new scenario. It opens a whole new scenario because it can take, like, measures can be taken on the basis of these force majeure. Unprecedented decisions, like extending the season after the 30th of June, unprecedented decisions like establishing that someone has won the league, like, for example, in Belgium, as it looks like it will be the decision pending the meeting of the 15th of April, they will have it, and I don't know if they will reconsider finishing or not the season right now, but UEFA has established they don't like it. These unprecedented decisions have the basis on this force majeure, and it will be difficult to contradict them. So, considering that FIFA cannot force players and clubs to extend their contracts or to postpone the entering into force to them, we enter in a new realm, in a new scenario, completely new scenario, where national laws may force players to continue playing after, or may force players to not receive their salaries, and the players will not have the right to complain about it. So, what's specifically FIFA position for these coronavirus situation? These guidelines first establish that contracts will be adjusted for the beginning of and the end of the seasons. When there's a problem of an execution of current contracts during the crisis, they will be solved via individual negotiation, player by player, or club negotiation first, national law or collective bargaining agreement. If that doesn't happen, FIFA allows some kind of unilateral decisions or measures taken, always provided that they are complying with national law. So, for example, we have in Spain the famous known as ERTE, which are labor proceedings for temporary adjustment, which means that clubs are allowed to suspend the contracts of the players, and the state will take care of their salaries up to an amount of 1,100 euros per month if they are single, 1,400 if they have 2 or more children. Well, obviously, for players in third divisions in Spain, this amount is not even close to their usual salaries. For players in third division, fourth division, probably be like okay. It does, obviously, we have been answering this question. The state will not pay Messi's or Hazard's salary. They will, if they get into this ERTE, this temporary employment procedure, they will get a maximum of 1,100 or a maximum of 1,400, depending on their familiar situation. So we have a law in Spain that allows clubs to stop paying salaries of players. So this obviously enters into contradiction, direct conflict with Article 14 bis of the RSTP, but players will have to accept it because national law allows it. What is going on right now? as you have heard, well, in England, there's also a limitation of 2,500, but also a procedure regarding this situation of the ERTE while the competitions are on hold. But what's going on in Spain, for example, is that clubs are reaching agreements with players to reduce their salaries. In Italy, the teams of the league of La Serie A have already announced that there's a reduction of the 33% or 16% of the annual salary of the players, depending on if the competition resumes or not. In Spain, right now, for example, Football Club Barcelona has arrived to an agreement that reduces in a 70% of the salary of the players during the months that this suspension lasts. It means that they will face a reduction on overall, like on total of the annual salary, around the 10%. La Liga has proposed or has suggested that players should take in between the 46 and the 49% of the losses in case competition resumes. Like 49% if it doesn't resume, 46% if it resumes. Like the union of players in Spain has counter-offered, let's say like that, with a 10% of reduction of salaries, and 20% in case that the competition do not resume. We're not talking about the same figures because La Liga is saying that players must assume the 49% if the La Liga does not resume or the competition do not resume of the total losses of the clubs, which obviously means it does not mean that they have to take 49% of their salaries, but the 49% of the total losses must be like assumed by the players. It's not being calculated how much will reduce the players' salaries. So it's not comparable, the 49% with the 20%. It's not comparable, but these are the two different offers up to today, at least, on the table. Depending, we're talking about from the clubs and for the union of players. FIFA, in his guidelines, establishes that if national law does not provide anything, if the collective bargaining agreement does not provide anything, and there's no possibility of negotiation within between the parties, FIFA assumes or establishes the jurisdiction of the DRC and the PSC in order to solve these conflicts or these disputes. And alternatively, and in any case, FIFA is of the opinion that contracts should be suspended. It means that players will not get their salary, always provided that proper insurance coverage is maintained and adequate alternative income support arrangements can be found for employees during the period in question. So it means that FIFA considers that contracts must be suspended while the suspension of the competitions is ongoing, and provided that players and employees receive enough economic support, the salaries can be like suspended too until the competition resumes. This position, it takes at least it shows us the perspective that FIFA will take once or in any case, if a case arrives to the DRC. But let's see. For me, the most important or the most intelligent option would be to negotiate between players and clubs, because otherwise it will be a disaster for everybody. Also, FIFA tries with these guidelines to avoid that between different countries there will be really or completely drastically, as they say it, they drafted it like that, drastically different treatment. So FIFA wants to avoid that players from Belarus, Moldova, or Ukraine receive a drastically different treatment from for example, than the players from Belgium or the players from Holland. So it's trying to unite or to unify the criteria implemented all over the world, with the difficulty that we have 211 countries, and of course we have 211 different realities and different impacts of the crisis on the different leagues. As I said, FIFA has opened the hands on the registration period dates. They will add a new exception because I don't know if you know it, but when you are a player and you lose your contract, you terminate your contract during the duration of a registration period, for example, in Europe from the 1st of July to the 31st of June, you terminate contract, your contract terminates the 1st of August, and you do not get a club before the registration period ends, then you will have the possibility to be registered after the transfer window. When FIFA has extended this possibility to all those that lose their contract, that terminate or expire their contract during or because of the coronavirus crisis. So if a player loses his contract or her contract because of the coronavirus crisis, regardless the date of expiry or termination of the contract, they will be allowed to register outside any registration period. Also, in September 2019, FIFA approved an amendment of the RSTP that established a limitation on the number of players on loan, meaning temporary transfers, players that are sent on loan for a year or 2 years to grant them the possibility to keep playing because they are not like experienced enough in their clubs, which happens a lot, for example, with the big clubs and the youngest players. This limitation that was scheduled to enter into force on the 1st of July 2020 has been postponed. It's not the only one that was supposed to enter into force in 2020, because there was also the obligation to implement a TMS, like a software to register transfers of players nationally for every national association, also entering into force on the 1st of July. That has not been postponed. Or the fact that the solidarity mechanism that usually or until now was established only for international transfers, that 5% of the transfer fee was only established for international transfers, now will be also established for national transfers when the training club is from another association. So for example, if between two French clubs there's a transfer, but the training club is from Chile or from Spain, that club will be able or will be allowed to request to claim for that solidarity mechanism, even if the transfer is nationally. That measure that was implemented or was scheduled to enter into force on the 1st of July will enter into force on the 1st of July. There has been no postponement on that sense. Also, and regarding the international players, clubs are not forced anymore to release the players during this crisis. And the 3 days, there's 2 days in, or 1 day in March and 2 days in April, and for international matches that are on hold, they will be subject to decision depending on how this crisis goes. Let's see if we can play behind closed doors, or even if we can play. And last but not least, it will be important to say that any procedures before the jurisdictional bodies, DRC, PSC, disciplinary committee, ethics committee will continue as they are scheduled. It is true that there will be a more flexible approach for the extension of deadlines or for the implementation or establishment of deadlines, but the procedures will continue and the decision will be still mandatory. So anyone that is thinking about not fulfilling or not enforcing or not complying with the decision of FIFA because of this situation, well, FIFA already established that it cannot be done. So they also already eliminated the decision. Where the problems will arise, and here I'm open for all your questions in the 15 minutes we have left. Players with 2 contracts overlapping, maximum length of contracts breach, for example, for minors. If a player is the age of 18 and a player has a 3 years contract and the contract finishes on the 30th of June, or because he reaches the age of 17, for example, from the 14th to the 17th, and he gets to 17 or gets to the deadline of 3 years on the 1st of July, and if the season continues up to the 20th of July, either we sign a new contract, because he cannot be under that contract because of the maximum length of 3 years while being a minor. Non-payment of salaries, as I said, there are countries like Spain that it can be done. So clubs can stop paying salaries and they will receive a maximum of 1,100 or 1,400, depending on the familial situation. And players cannot complain about it, cannot sue the club for non-payment of salaries, cannot terminate the contract for non-payment of salaries, even if, according to 14Bs, if it gets more than 2 months. Contracts terminated during the season due to drafting, for example, before the last match, because the contract says 30th of June, and FIFA, as I said, cannot extend it ex officio. So there has to be an agreement between the clubs and the players. So let's see how it goes once we know if the season will be over. Same thing with loans. Players that are on loan in a club until the 30th of June. What will happen with them? Do the clubs and the player get to enter into new agreement to extend it until the end of the season? Can the former club or the owner club reject to maintain the player in that team? Different salaries between current contracts and new one. For example, not only for those that had a new contract because the ongoing one was finishing on 30th of June, but for example, players that because they reach a certain goal or they reach a certain age, knew that the next year's salary was higher than this year's salary. What happens if the season continues for 2 months? What happens with the salary for those 2 months? It's included in this year's salary. It's not included in this year's salary. In my opinion, we keep going to the negotiation. Let's see. Once we know if the season is going to finish or not, let's see what happens. Difference, for example, players to reject to play after the prohibition is lifted. Like there's a just cause to reject to play if we are not safe. Well, that will depend on the country. But once the authorities allow to reopen stadiums and to reopen to resume the competitions, I don't think there's enough just cause or enough basis for a player to reject playing. They might face disciplinary sanctions from the club. What happens if a player is in his country because the club allowed it to leave from Spain, for example, to his country, his home country, and now the competition resumes in Spain, but he cannot travel from his home country because of the coronavirus? That would be justified. My opinion, it will be justified because players obviously do not decide when they can or cannot travel. So let's see. That will make a difference if the player left the country without permission. That we might face a different scenario where disciplinary sanctions might be imposed on the player. What happens with injuries during the season extensions? If a player does, for example, take like the risk of going to play somewhere else and or to play during the extension of the season, and it has a new contract and he's injured during this period of extension, is just cause to not be hired by the new club? In my opinion, no. As I said before, medical tests or medical examination cannot be like an excuse to terminate the contract. So if they have the contract already signed and they get injured, the club already allowed him or took the risk of letting him play the number of games, of matches pending until the rest of the season. So whether or not it's extended or not, always provided that the authorities maintain or keep the health or the best interest of the players' health in their minds, and they play in like within a regular space between the matches, or with at least proper space between the matches. I don't think there's a basis to terminate the contract. National solidarity mechanism in training competition may be affected. Yes, because if we're talking about that 23rd season, or the season of the 23rd birthday of a player, what happens if the season is extended until the 28th of August and for 28th of July, and the player player's birthday is on the 15th of July? The 23rd birthday season is this one and not next one. So clubs will lose a complete season. So that's things that we'll have to take into account when we face all these situations once we know what happens with the season. I'm reading here now some questions about, like, my dear friend Panagoitis, that says that if a player returns to his parent club after a loan, as he won't be registered, he will not play. If the parent club reduces his salary, will get in this area, will the player's agent receive a commission for the new amount paid to the player? Well, players and like agents do have a job to do here. They will have to negotiate on behalf of the players for the best interest of everyone. I think that the best interest of everyone right now is the competition. So if the players want to have competition to come back, they will have to be also understand the situation of the clubs. This is both ways. So clubs will have to understand also the situation of the players. But if this is more a marketing decision, if I were a player like an agent, I would not probably charge, depending on how much I have to work, I will not charge my complete fee for the negotiation of this situation, because otherwise I will be charging myself, like I'm putting myself in a difficult situation. I have here Victor Ocando, who says that if a player, hi Victor, how are you? If a player expiring contract is extended until the end of the new season, this will extend the period of which the player will get paid. In this scenario, will the player's agent receive a commission? No. Sorry. This was the question of Victor that just jumped in when I was reading the one from Panagoitis. Just answer. Panagoitis, player returns to his parent club as he won't be registered, he will not play. If the parent club reduces his salary, would this constitute just cause, assuming the conditions of 14Bs be met? I don't think we can apply 14Bs right now, because it's going to be complicated, because I think that players will not return from the loans, because the loan is for a season, and FIFA does not establish a difference between permanent transfers or temporary transfers. So I think that this extension applies only to loans. So the parent club will reduce his salary. It's not justified either, because if they indeed return, the parent club has a contract. So that contract has to be honored, has to be they have to comply with the terms of that contract. So unless they do it in application of national law, I don't think they will constitute 14Bs. We have here Kane Attard. How are you? Do you think it's a good idea to enter a new contract agreement at this moment in time for either party, the club and the player, if the player's contract finishes at the end of the season? I don't think that's the best time to do it. In any case, I don't think they are doing it, because actually now with the situation that we have right now, it is very complicated to foresee when the new season will start. And it's not the same to play from September to June and playing from July to June. So because it depends, like it's more months, it's more salary or less salary, or the same salary but divided in less months. So right now, I think that everyone that does not have a contract is waiting to see what happens. Julian, if a player contract is suspended for a certain period, if it is possible for the club to retain the player, or the player could negotiate with another club freely? Well, here is a good question, Julian. Thank you. If a player contract is suspended, it's suspended. It's alive, but it's suspended. Can the player negotiate with another club? Not freely, because Article 18 establishes of the RSTP establishes that the limitation of 6 months, and that limitation has not been modified. So if the player is suspended in accordance with national law, it's a right of the players, of the clubs. So I don't think that they could negotiate with another club freely. They cannot sign either a contract for the period of the suspension, because once the competition resumes, and we do not know when that will happen, the contract is again alive. So we do not even know when to put it, and also the limitation of the length of competitions, or even the fact that a player cannot play for more than 2 clubs in the same season. So there's a lot of limitations to take into account there. Another question from Panagoitis: the dismissal of players for not accepting a pay cut. under this experiment would amount to termination with just cause, without just cause, right? For me, it depends on the national law. In Spain, we cannot terminate a contract without just cause for not accepting a pay cut, because we have the right, or there's a right here in Spain as clubs, or for the clubs to reduce the player's salary. So the not accepting the pay cut, it's for me not an excuse. And for me, it would be a termination without just cause if the reason for the termination is the non-reducing of the salary. We have like question from Kankuder Khan. The FA, English Federation handbook states that the association may also extend the period of playing, shall be deemed necessary, and agreements between clubs, players shall be subject to the association. Is it applicable, and could contract be extended automatically? No, automatically, as you read, is shall be deemed necessary and agreement between clubs and players. And the association may also extend the periods for playing. We have here like a very specific and very special and unprecedented circumstances. So as I said, no, automatically. There has to be an agreement because there's a lot of issues to take into account in that agreement. We have another question from Andres Simon. Could it be, in these circumstances, the reduction of the salary of the player at just cause to breach of contract? No, depending, or at least no in any case, because as I said, there's a lot of countries that allow it as a right of the clubs because of this situation. The reduction of salary, negotiated is the best option, is the most intelligent. But in any case, clubs like Spanish or even English have the right, in accordance with national law, to ask for a suspension of the contract and, as a consequence, suspension of the salary. So I don't think is a just cause to terminate contract. Yahya, how are you? Yahya, hope you're fine there in Turkey. First of all, I would like to enlighten whether these recommendations for the international players are also national players can also benefit. Thank you. For me, it's an international and national guidelines. It means that for me, one of the main principles and a very important principle, and the reason behind FIFA existing is the unification of the football market, football world around the globe. So these guidelines are for everyone. National teams, national players in their home country, in players playing in a different country, there's no difference. So these will apply for, or at least is intended to be applied for everyone. Question from Zoltan. Should FIFA or UEFA define a referential end date to national championship to avoid such a chaotic situation? The problem is that nor FIFA or UEFA have the power to establish when they should finish, because what happens if, for example, national authorities of a country establish that there's no possibility to continue playing until the end of the year or until the end of August, for example, then the non-complying of FIFA or UEFA and with the decision of FIFA or UEFA might face even a disciplinary sanction. So what I think they should do is at least establish a deadline, not to terminate the to finish the competitions, but yes, to decide whether or not competitions continue. In case of a different MAs who may finish their respective national championship with different end date, then contract expiration dates and transfer windows will consequently change from country to country. Yes, I agree absolutely with you, Sultan. There's a potential chaos in the next year's transfer window and the next year end of season, beginning of season, because depending on the impact of coronavirus in different countries, we will have different situations. For example, if Belgium confirms on the 15th of April their decision of terminating, finishing the competition right now, how it is, clubs from Belgium, players that play in Belgium, will be free until next year, and that will have consequences on the next season's classification for the Europa League. And the Champions League will UEFA already threatened with disciplinary or potential disciplinary sanctions. Let's see how it goes. But yeah, I agree. It will be a little chaotic next transfer window. Another question from Ochumor from Panagoit is like, many players will leave their current teams as free agent. Do you think competitive balance would be truly maintained upon the resumption of the season? Well, I don't understand exactly what do you mean with that they leave as free agents. But in any case, one of the main concerns of FIFA is precisely the integrity of the competitions. That's why they give prevalence to the ongoing contract to those new. So the maintenance or the contractual stability for those player or those ongoing contracts up to the 30th of June or up to the end of the 2019-2020 season. It's the main concern of FIFA. So I don't think many players will terminate the contract before the end of the season, because they also don't forget that there's also bonuses and prizes to collect depending on how the FIFA how the season goes. Do you think that prospective new clubs being in financial hardship will begin to have legitimately abandoned negotiations with compelling seasons? Well, pre-contract, if you are already entering into pre-contract, you will have to honor it or negotiate a different term. So yes, there will be consequences on that, and for sure, clubs struggling financially due to this crisis will regret having signed those contracts. Is the same contractual interpretation in national associations. The example, the Canadian Premier League has not started its season yet. It's delayed, and the delay may continue. What happens to new contracts, even a new team this year, if season not played at all? Well, contracts, if the season does not start, it would be economically a disaster for everyone. And the advantage that Canada will have in its Premier League not being started is that all clubs will start the competition knowing what will happen, which is one of the main concerns that I have for the next season. So if clubs start the season in September, this past 2019, with an expectation of how the competition was going to have or was going to be, now they are all in a situation that they not know what will happen. So for me, and as discussed with Juan de Dios Crespo, the owner of the firm, about it, the best solution would be to finish the season whenever it has to be finished. If it has to be finished in November, it has to be finished in November, and then start a transitional season 2020-2021 in a way that everybody knows what's going on from the very beginning, to play in same conditions, so to keep the integrity of the competition, knowing everyone what to expect from the new competition. Changing the rules of a competition in the middle of it, it's kind of tricky and dangerous. Jose Miguel Gonzalez, if the clubs can terminate the contracts during the season, it's fair for a club with economic problems that the season finished, so that they could let go some players and reduce the amount of salaries. Well, that's kind of tricky too, because a lot of clubs pay the salaries based on seasons. So if the season is over, they have to pay the whole amount of the season. And we have to also take into account that, for example, players that now are in the prime, the first positions in the leaderboard or in the last position in the leaderboard, they have prizes and bonuses depending on where they finish. So it's kind of complicated. I don't know if they will save a lot of money. Angus, hi, how are you? What effect would a player being given a wage reduction have on the contract? Would that be classified as a breach? And if not paying full 2 months? No, thank you. Like, your question was first, but I'm reading up to down, so sorry, but I already answered. 14Bs, I don't think it applies. Always provided national law allows the reduction of wages, and it's not done unilaterally, as FIFA says. Similars in the North American League, especially the current case of NHL and NBA? No, absolutely not, because as we all know, or I think North American leagues are based basically on the collective bargaining agreement. So these articles are not applicable at all for those competitions. Pablo Martin Maestro, do you think the season is going to end and the Champions is possible to end without a winner? Well, everything is possible. Article 83 of the Champions League and 81 of the Europa League says that in case of foreseen situations or situations not foreseen in regulations, the emergency panel or the emergency board of the UEFA will decide on this situation. So everything can happen. I think that we will have to finish. We have to finish and then do a transitional season 2020-2021. Victor, again, is extended until the new end date. This will extend the period which the player get paid in the scenario will the player receive. Oh, this is already asked. Hi, Marianne. What happens with players in the final 6 months who have already signed new contracts with other clubs if the current contract will be extended via the Juve to include the duration of the league suspension? Then the two contracts will overlap. Yes, they will overlap, and that's prohibited by FIFA. I don't think anyone will face any disciplinary sanction because of that, but I do think that FIFA will have to address this, and players will have to either accept playing 2 months within the same salary with the ongoing contract, and then new clubs to accept paying the same salary with 2 months less of competition. So, but that's a matter of first how the contract is drafted and the will of the parties to negotiate. And Shannon, do you know if the government is making any adjustments with regard to visas and tax residencies due to the pandemic? For example, if a person is in the country for more than 6 months or out of the country for more than 6 months due to the quarantine, will they stick to 183-day rule? I haven't read anything about that, and I think that there are no steps taken in that sense. But you can have a possible case of discussion, or at least grounds for discussion in that sense. But I don't think that the government will accept sneaking out of payment of taxes because of that. But well, you never know. Have 4 more questions. Like here, if the Jose Miguel Gonzalez, if the clubs can terminate the contracts during the season, it's favorable for a club with economic problems. It's been answered. Victor, why not open a scheduled transfer window for the expiring contract by June 30 before starting the season? Why not? Well, in my opinion, it will be very difficult to open a new transfer window for those contracts expiring on 30th of June, because if the season continues, that will for sure put in jeopardy the integrity of the league, for sure, because we will have, in the last games of the season, we will have players changing teams, which it's not good. Another question from Victor: what happened with the bonus that are paid to the player during the course of a contract due on a certain date and not at the end of the season? That is one of the points of discussion of all the contracts. Like, imagine that, for example, a league finishes today because of a governmental order, and there's teams that go on relegation that could have been saved, and then players loses their salaries because they get a cut of 50% because they are relegated to second division. But teams that save the category that might be go relegated at the end of the season have to pay a bonus for keeping the first division, like the first division position, or for getting to the first 6 and then getting to Europa League. Like, these prices, these bonus have to be paid. I don't think they will start on they will depend on the suspension of the competition. Then we will have situations where we can justify if the payment of a bonus for accomplishing a goal over the season is accrued or not, if the season finishes because of this. Well, clubs can invoke force majeure to not pay them. Let's see. That's a very good point. It's a good point for following topics in the upcoming weeks. And Diego, how are you? Hope everything is good in Paraguay. Do you consider that the world soccer will change forever after this? I don't think the world of football is going to change forever, but we will see some adjustments on transfers, on salaries. I think that we will see some kind of self-regulation on the market. That, I think, that at least for the next 1-2 transfer windows, but I don't think it will change forever. At the end, is something unprecedented that we hope won't happen again. So no more questions here.
No more questions.
Exceeded the time. Thank you so much for being there.
Thank you very much to you for sharing your knowledge with us. It's been a very long session with a lot of questions, with many people from around the world. So thank you very much for joining us today. And thanks to everyone for participating. Remember that you will soon receive a link to the webinar recording, which will be able to download. In case that you are agents, club managers, even players, or just football or sport fans interested in general, you will be able to read again the rules thanks to Enric's presentation. So we invite you, as always, to stay connected and keep following new webinars. And you can find all the information on our social media channels. Thank you very much and see you soon. Stay safe.
Bye.
Bye.